So whether you're an old school emo from the early 2000s or you've just stumbled across one of the greatest genres to ever exist, pop punk guitar tones are one of the most fun tones to play around with, and they're a lot simpler to make than what you think they might be. Now, if any of you have followed me over the past year, then you might have seen this reel pop up on either my Instagram or YouTube channel. This reel is pretty much my main reason of making this video, as to date, I still get weekly DMs from people on Instagram asking for this preset patch. I've used this on countless live shows, and also I perform in 2 pop punk function bands, and this preset patch will get you 90% of the way there for playing pretty much most pop punk riffs. Now, if you're on the Quad Cortex, then I'll leave a link to the Cortex Cloud in the description where you can download that preset. Otherwise, if you're on another amp modeler, then simply follow along on screen and build a rig similar to what I'm showcasing on the Cortex. So without further ado, let's open up Cortex Control and take a dive into how I made this preset. So we've got an instance of Cortex Control now open on the screen, which you should be able to see. When I went about making this pop punk patch, first, the main thing I wanted to do was have a dual amp setup. I'm just a big lover of running 2 amps left and right. I think it sounds huge. And there's a couple techniques in here which I will show you later on that kind of makes it sound a bit better. But the first thing we've got to have a look at is amps. Now, when looking at what amps to use for a pop punk guitar rig, when I looked at a lot of the old records from like early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was either Marshall JCM 800s or it was Mesa Boogies. Now, a couple people used Mesa Boogie dual rectifiers, other people just had smaller Mesa Boogie combos, but that was generally the main gist. So the first one that I've got up on here is I had this capture of a JCM 800. Now, I believe the capture was from Sweetwater. If you download the patch, you'll also get this capture. Now, to hear how the JCM 800 sounds, if I turn our drive off and also turn our dual amp off, I'm just going to change the routing here so you can hear it straight down the middle rather than pan to the left. So this is what the JCM 800 should sound like on its own. Now, as you can hear, that's not really too driven of a JCM 800 tone. Like, of course, it's got some punch in there, but it's not anywhere near as oversaturated as you kind of would think it would be. What that kind of does is it allows a lot of the voice and the articulation of the notes to really ring out, which is really what we want with pop punk. We want to hit those nice bar chords, and the harder that we dig in, the more distorted it gets. But we don't want to miss any of that kind of information that's in the strings there. Now, if we pair that with this CA Johns 2C, which is a Mesa Boogie style amplifier, and I've got that running through a Mesa Boogie Recto V30 cab as well, you should hear that this one's a little bit more darker of a tone, but it's also a little bit more saturated. So blending together, we're going to get the articulation out of the JCM 800, and we're going to get a lot more of the thump from this Mesa Boogie. So you can really hear that it's a little bit more saturated, but it's definitely got a lot darker of a tone there, which works quite well with the bite from the JCM 800. Now, if we pan them both left and right, and you also see there's another block in there, which I'll go over in a moment, but we should hear that it's a nice, well-rounded kind of tone, especially for any kind of pop punk chugging riffs. Now that's a real nice tone and already pretty much given us 90% of the way there for the pop punk feel that we're after. It's definitely real responsive as well. The more I dig in, the more I get out of these amplifiers. Now the block that you see in front of the amp here is a simple delay. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm basically trying to replicate dual guitar players live. And the way in which we do this is we pretty much set up a 14 millisecond delay time. We put the mix on 100, feedback on 0. And what this kind of does, this emulates how I've used it on certain plugins, especially from Neural. They've got that dual control up on the top, but it really works if you want to use it live, and it just kind of thickens your whole sound. You've got to play around sometimes, depending on the amp, you might get some phasing issues. When you get it to work, it really does open up that whole tone. Without it, it sounds like this. And with it, sounds like this. Now the reason to choose something like a JCM 800, I had a quick look. A lot of bands, especially bands like MCR on the Black Parade kind of album, were all using JCM 800s. There was a couple Mesa Boogies in the studio as well. And in regards to the Mesa Boogie, you had guitarists like Chris Burney from Bowling for Soup use something like a dual rectifier both live and in the studio. Running into the front end of these amplifiers, I've got a drive pedal. Now the drive pedal in question is our green 808, basically a tube screamer. Now the tube screamer seems to be the drive pedal of choice, especially around that era. But what it does to the front end of both amps is it kind of just cleans everything up. It gets rid of a lot of that flabby low end on the amplifiers, makes everything a little bit tighter. And we're really only using it with a little bit of overdrive just to push the front end that little bit more. You can really hear the difference when I do some kind of chugging bar chords. Sounds a little bit like this. Right, so next up we've got our wet effects. Now I'm running a very simple wet effects chain here. The first one is we've got a simple ping pong delay. Reason for choosing the ping pong delay, if we're already doing the simple delay at the start just to get a slightly wider stereo field live. Most pop punk bands normally only have one guitar player, so you're trying to sound bigger on stage. Now with this ping pong delay, we're just creating even more of a stereo field live. I personally really love how that sounds. It just bounces the delay from speaker to speaker. And our reverb, what we're using is we're just using ambience reverb. Now, if you saw my Slash video in previous, I talk about this ambience. What we're really trying to do is not have it as an effect as such. What we're trying to do is really replicate an amp in a room style tone. It just makes you connect a little bit more to the amp modeler, but also a little bit more of a stereo feel there in terms of ambiance. Even though they're not dialed in too high in the mix, they still give you enough if you are going to do any kind of solo tones like this. So last of all, on our signal chain, you will see that I've added a compressor. Now what this compressor is doing is, seeing as I'm running dual amps, I've been playing around lately by adding a glue compressor on the end, and what it does is it just brings those amp signals closer together. Makes you feel like you're playing one amp, but you still got the stereo field of both of them. If I'm being honest, it's more of a feel thing than any kind of tonal element, although it is serving a practical use because what it's doing is it's bringing our left and right signal just slightly closer together and stopping them from raising too far above each other. As you can see when I play, the gain reduction is pretty much only 1.5 to dB at most. I'm adding that back in with the makeup gain, but it's a very, very light compression on here. It almost doesn't really come through when I'm just playing open chords. You'll see the gain reduction is not doing anything, but when I'm doing those chugs, it's actually just tackling some of that low end, especially say from the dual rectifier, and bringing it a little bit closer to what the JCM would be. If I A/B it without, you'll hear a slight difference. Like I said, very subtle difference on there, but it's more of a feel thing as a player. So give it a go on your next preset if you're running any kind of dual amps. Now, last of all, what I've got on top is I've got this utility gain. All I'm really using this for is just an 8 dB boost. I generally love the guitar tone as it is, and I didn't really want to mask it by putting another drive pedal in front, so I'm literally using this gain pedal just as a boost into the front end for any kind of solo work. As you can see, this preset is pretty simple, and if I'm being honest, with pop punk, you don't really need much more than just a couple of good amps. It also works pretty well for that new LA rock scene that's coming up at the moment. Artists like MGK and Modsun. If you're into that kind of thing, it's worth checking out. And if you're not on a QC and you're doing this on another amp modeler, then my main takeaway points to follow would be your amp has either got to be a JCM 800 or a Mesa Boogie, and ideally if you can run both on a dual amp, that would be even better. Definitely tighten up the sound with a tube screamer or some kind of drive pedal in the front end. Have a try with the sample delay technique, setting it to about 14 milliseconds and seeing if you can kind of get that dual guitar sound. My personal opinion would be keep wet effects to a minimum. Use them for fun solos, but especially if you're doing any kind of chugging riff, keep them as dry as you can. And also test out using a glue compressor at the very end of your signal chain. It might just kind of tighten everything up and bring your two amps together. Definitely worth checking out. All in all, that should get you somewhere close to 90% of playing all the pop punk riffs out there. But of course, each song may need additional pedals or adjusting, but you can use this preset as a foundation and then really go from there. Make sure to drop a comment in the description below on what you thought, and also any techniques that you might use to get a pop punk guitar tone. And as always, guys, I'll see you all in the next one.